Bombshell testimony from military officers. They say UFOs are real and they are a threat to national security.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Creatures of the night, be prepared to witness the weird, unknown, and extraterrestrial. There's no need for roads where we're going. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Life forms. Researchers at Harvard speculate that an unidentified technologically advanced population could be secretly living among humans on Earth.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was already a man.
The Garden State might just be a hotspot for Bigfoot sightings.
To infinity and beyond!
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I hope you guys have had a fantastic weekend thus far. It's been a little bit busy for myself. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late, but today has been a handful. But I'm here. I'm finally here. I want to say thank you to everybody that is tuning in and checking us out from all over the world. Let us know where you're coming from. Hit us up in the comment section. Hit us up in the live chat. And while you're there, hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. You know what to do. All righty. So with all that out of the way, yesterday I was, I was at home and given some odd news by some people that I trust. We'll put it that way. That the grand jury indictment in the Bryan Kohberger case has come to a decision, and apparently the Bryan Kohberger and his defense team have been granted the change of venue there. Now, I wonder if the pro-burgers are going to freak out about this because I'm telling them that I have confirmed this and it's not out there yet. Because apparently I lie a lot. even though a lot of the stuff that I have said prior to the documents coming out in other cases, or not in other cases, but in other situations in this case, I'm still maybe perhaps they're going to think that it didn't change because I'm saying that it did change. Anyways. Bryan Kohberger, he wanted the change of venue. Now, there's a little bit of a twist to this. We don't know where the change of venue is going to be at. So, according from, I almost gave it away. From what I was told, was that the decision was made. However, where it's going to be moved to has not yet, and that decision is going to be made by the Idaho State Supreme Court. Now, the first thing that came to mind, and I've kind of felt this way, and I've kind of explained this to those that I talk to that are close to this case as well. And I explained this as well last night, that in my opinion, this judge is spineless. This guy, he has allowed this defense team to walk all over him. He has allowed things that haven't been allowed in other cases, such as, the amount of crap that's going on with the IGG. If Moscow had a judge with a spine, with some courage, with some confidence in what he knows or what he can or can't do, then I think that this case, or this court hearing, trial, whatever you want to call it, would have probably been sped up a little bit. There would have been a lot of things, and that goes for both sides. Now, I'm talking about the alibi on Bryan Kohberger's side, and I'm talking about all these defense motions if there's anything outside of the IGG. Right now, we know, or we can assume, that a lot of the documents that they're wanting are from the IGG. It's been noted several times in hearings and in court documents that they are wanting more information from the IGG. And we do know that they also were looking at some video camera footage, but in the court hearing where they brought up the hearing or the missing footage or camera or whatever it was, at the end of that hearing, towards the end at least, Ann Taylor was talking, I think it was with one of the officers there for Moscow Police Department, one of the detectives. It may have been Payne or Maury, I don't remember. But, she was saying, hey, those pictures and everything that we're looking for in that thumb drive and in evidence, blah, 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 blah. He's like, yeah, And so she knows where all that's at. But at the end of that hearing, she was kind of whining to the judge that she wanted the prosecution to go and find these specific pictures and documents that were amongst all the evidence pieces that they had so that they can locate these things. But, I digress. So though that information was there, they know where it's at. So we know that that's one of the things. We also know it's the IgG. We also know that the IgG has been utilized in several cases, and it's never been having to be explained up to this extent to any of the defense teams ever before, because it's not utilized in court, right? The IgG is equivalent to like a lie detector test. A lie detector test can't tell you if you're 100% lying or not. It can kind of tell you that you are, or it can tell the person that is reading the lie detector test that this person is making movements that would suggest that this person is being deceitful. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're deceitful. I've seen people pass lie detector tests that we knew were lying and they passed it. And we've seen people fail things that were impossible for them to have been, for them to have been lying to those things. So it's not 100%, and neither is the IgG, because the IgG didn't test Bryan Kohberger's DNA to the DNA on the knife sheath. What it did was it took the DNA on the knife sheath, it created an SNP profile from the STR profile that the Idaho State Lab created. And from that profile, they were able to try to, trace down family members and to try to figure out who the person was that left the DNA on the sheath. Now, it's going to point at somebody, but because it's not testing one for one, it's not going to be able to tell you for 100% guarantee. It's just going to say, hey, more than likely it's this person. Now, how do you test the accuracy of the IgG? You go out there and you swab the individual. In this case, it would have been Bryan Kohberger. And when you swab them, if it matches DNA, then that means the IgG was correct. If it doesn't match, if it comes back to like a distant relative still, cousin or whatever it may be, that means the IgG was done wrong. They followed the wrong steps. So it's just a little bit of logic and common sense and knowing and kind of stopping to think a little bit of how it works and why it's not allowed in court. And yet it's still an issue almost 2 years later. And it all has to come back down to judge. Going back to the recent trial or hearing, where he was like, this is gonna be the hardest decision. I'm not ready to make a decision. I'm like, dude, you knew going into that hearing that this was a change of venue hearing. You knew what they were going to say and do. You understood and knew what the evidence was on both sides. You may not have known how they were going to present it, but you should have known what was there. And yet not to be able to make a decision, and now to not even be able to make a decision as to where you're going to move the hearing at and sending it up the chain of command and hoping that the Supreme Court or the Idaho State Supreme Court is going to save your ass. I mean, come on now, man. I'm not sure like how he got elected or what it is, how they do it there in Idaho, how he was appointed or whatever the case may have been. But you don't usually get those positions without wanting them and understanding the responsibility that comes with those positions. And if you can't do it and they get the change of venue, I hope they change the judge too. Because at the end of the day, the only way that Bryan Kohberger is going to be acquitted in this case is if this court system falls apart. And we're looking at the judge right now, and I'm a little bit worried. I'm not going to lie. And it's not that I think that Bryan Kohberger is innocent or any of those nonsense. It's because there are people who have gotten away with things, who have been acquitted, for crimes in the past. There's a lot of famous ones that we all know about. And, and it's because of mistakes made by either law enforcement, prosecution, or a weak ass judge. And in this situation, I got a weak ass judge. And I'm concerned about it. Let's see. I'm going to go through some of I'll go through some of your comments and questions here. I haven't been looking at them too hard, so I'm going to scroll up a little bit. If I see a couple of stars, I'll bring it up. And then here in a little bit, we'll talk more about the amount of documents that Bryan Kohberger's defense team has put in efforts to save his rear end from the death penalty, which is why I think they wanted to move to Ada County to begin with. I'm not saying that by moving to Ada County that he is not going to get the death penalty if found guilty. We've seen Chad Daybell and others go to Ada County and get, found guilty of heinous crimes and be given the death penalty there. I think the evidence is what the evidence is, whether it's in one place or another. If he's guilty, he's going to be guilty, right? And if he's not guilty and he gets acquitted, he should be acquitted wherever it is as well. So, if there truly is some sort of prejudice, which it didn't really seem like, well, let me put it this way. Was there biases against Bryan Kohberger? Probably. There's probably some folks who think that he's 100% did it. I'm one of them. I think he did it. I'm not biased because I'm law enforcement or any of those things. I'm biased to the evidence that is out there. I can't see a way that anybody else could have committed this crime. And, if there's something that's out there that, I'm open to hearing something that can, that says he didn't do it. Not saying that I think that there is something. I highly doubt that there is. In fact, I don't believe that there's anything that's going to come out that says it wasn't him, but I'm open to it. But for me, it's the opposite way of the way it should be. He shouldn't have to prove it wasn't him. The state should have to prove it was him. But the way I see things, I think they already have, just with the little bit of information that's there. Again, not everybody has to see everything to understand what happened here. Some people can articulate things and figure things out with little or less information. It's kind of like when I say 2 + 2 is 4. I know a lot of you guys are smiling right now, especially my wife, because she hates when I say this. But I can figure that problem out in my head. Some people need to use their fingers, and some people need to write it down. But just because I can figure that out now in my head doesn't mean that I'm wrong. Which means just because I don't have to have all the information and I know that this guy committed this crime, doesn't mean that I'm wrong just because I don't have all the information. Anywho, let's see some of these comments that you have and questions. Can you take the DP off the table in an anti-DP state? I don't know. I think that there's two facets there's two parts of the trial, right? You have the innocent guilt phase, and then you have the sentencing phase. So those are two different things. Now, they can find him guilty and not put him to death if the jury chooses not to. If they're the type that, I'm not a lawyer. Let me premise this again. I'm not a lawyer. I don't really know much of anything when it comes to the court system. So you don't take my word for anything that, about that. But I don't know. But I think that the jury makes up that decision, and that's going to be up to them. I mean, if you're in a county that, maybe perhaps people are more open to the death penalty, they may prefer to go to a county where there's more people that aren't open to it, even if it's a smaller amount, even if you get a jury that is somewhat, majority of them want the death penalty. I don't know if that has to be a unanimous decision as well. I don't know those things. Those are things we need to ask a lawyer. Good stuff to ask, though. But it would be interesting to know. Let's see. Didn't Brett Payne also answer the question from the prosecution, said he had met with Ann to help her with the evidence in the office 6 times? That's true. That's 100% true. So it's not like they're hiding it from them. They just don't want to do their work themselves. And that's the defense, that is. Oh, all right, let's continue. It cannot be moved out of state. That is true. It cannot be moved out of state. So I'm hoping that it ends up being moved to a county that is closer to Latah. And the only reason I want it to be closer to Latah is because the family members of the victims, they deserve their justice, and to go in there and excuse me, and see the evidence firsthand, and also see whether or not they got the right person. I'm not saying anybody questions that. However, especially if somebody's life is at stake when it comes to Kohberger, you want to make sure, you want to be able to go there. And for some folks, they want to see I don't know. I don't know what I would do if I was in that situation. But it seems like some of the family members want to attend the trial. Now, if they make it that much further away, I think that could be another tactic by the defense. They want it far away so that way the victim's family members don't go to the trial. That way the jury doesn't see the sobbing family members, the sobbing mom and dad, brothers and sisters. So they try to make it as far away as possible. I think that's another tactic upon why that's going on. Let's see. Is the sheath part of a murder weapon? Wouldn't that sheath be on the belt? The sheath, there's tons of reasons why the sheath wasn't on the belt. It's been rumored that he allegedly used the Dickies jumpsuit, which don't have belt loops. So you can't wear a belt, just because they have a sheath doesn't mean you have a belt loop or a belt to hold it. You know what I'm saying? I've seen people have a gun in a holster in their vehicle, but it's not on their belt either, but it's in a holster. So, just because it would make sense where would it be? It doesn't mean that's what happened in this situation either. All right. So in Idaho, the Supreme Court decides where the case goes. From what I read today, the judge only changes it is if judge to be laid off. I hope he does, man, to be honest with you. I really do. I think he is weak, and I've thought about this before this ruling. This has been something that I've thought of since the IGG stuff has stayed in effect, since they didn't force Bryan Kohberger's hand on the alibi thing like they claimed that they were. And just like all these defense, court documents that they keep throwing in that they want more and more information. He's allowing this freaking circus show to continue. It's because of him. I don't understand about it potentially keeping the same judge. So, for example, the venue changes to Boise. Does that mean Judge John Judge has to travel too? I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm not familiar with all that stuff. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Let's see. And I saw one more. In my opinion, Judge granted the change of venue to protect against appeals. He could have, but I don't think it was there. Appeal the damn thing. They're going to be appeals anyways. You're going to go through appeals forever. I think in Idaho, it's what the average is 27 years before somebody who's put on death row that ends up becoming, or before the sentence is completed. It's like 27 plus years before that happens. So there's going to be appeals like crazy. In fact, they automatically get an appeal if it becomes a death penalty thing. And from what I understand, again, I'm not a lawyer. I only talk about the things that I know, and I don't know much about the lawyer stuff. Thank you so much for Miss Dog Lover comes in with a $4.99 super chat. Says Allen and Kohberger both on the stand at the same time. Hope we can deal with both at once. That would be interesting. The more the stuff comes out about Richard Allen, though, the more I see. Initially, I thought that was pretty clear deal. It was Richard Allen. But again, like I say, I do keep an open mind for things that, could possibly be different. And when the defense dropped their document with some actual information that could lead to a different possible suspect, Elvis Fields and some of the descriptions that he had said made me think that maybe perhaps there was something more to this. Now, I didn't think that Richard Allen had nothing to do with the case. I felt that the timeline was too strong for it not to be him on the bridge, but I thought to myself, maybe perhaps somebody else was involved. And, I was open to that possibility. Come to find out there's no evidence of it whatsoever, so they're not allowing that to come into court because I guess everybody had some sort of alibi. They were where they said they were. And I think Richard Allen has confessed something like 60 times now. It's pretty crazy stuff. But thank you for your super chat. We appreciate you. Can the Supreme Court kick it back and tell him to do his job? I think he granted the change of venue already. I don't know if they can kick him back to change that to keep it in Utah. Perhaps they can kick it back and tell him to choose. But Could be a situation where the Supreme Court has to do the choosing for him anyways. We are in total agreement on this one, Daniel. What a shame. This judge seems biased. I don't know if he seems biased. I just think he seems weak, and he's allowing a circus show, whether it's the prosecution or the defense. My opinion, and this is just my opinion, when it comes to the alibi and some of the pings and phone things and cast stuff, I honestly think that was some sort of tactic on both sides. The tactic was Bryan Kohberger didn't want to give the alibi up until he knew what, the prosecution knew, so he can kind of make his story kind of match what it is that they have. And at the same time, the defense kind of felt that that's possibly what could be happening. So they were, taking their time to release the information to the defense. And this judge allowed it all. He allowed it all. That screams weakness to me. No spine. Like I can't, I understand there's some hard decisions, things of that nature, but this is the position you chose to be in. And you chose and probably understood when you took your oath or whatever it is you take to be a judge, that comes with making some harsh decisions. You make hard decisions, or should have been making hard decisions your entire career. Whether somebody's going to go to jail for X amount of years or for the rest of their life, whatever the case may have been, those are decisions that you should have been accustomed to making. Now, I understand the heinousness of this crime, but at the end of the day, it's a quadruple homicide. There's evidence, and you have a survey that showed numbers that within the margin of error, the places were practically the same when it comes to quote unquote biasness from the community. You still think it's a hard choice. I mean, maybe you're in the wrong, maybe in the wrong freaking work field. You know what I mean? So judges hate being reversed on appeal. I mean, I get it. Possibly. I mean, I don't know. You shouldn't be taking things personally. You shouldn't be a judge if you're taking things personally. Same thing in law enforcement. If you're the type of person that's going to take something personally and then, not be able to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Treating people the same way, regardless of what may have happened in the past, then, you shouldn't be in those positions. You shouldn't be a judge if you can't handle, your decision being overruled or changed at an upper level. Like, those things are going to happen. You did your job. Once it goes on and it goes further, you can't handle those things. It's just kind of when I was in law enforcement, we would, find something, arrest somebody or whatever. Now, I didn't really have this problem because I was really good at my reports, but, there were times where I had seen somebody had gotten arrested and they got a really good lawyer. DWIs are usually the ones that they kind of get away with, because if you have somebody who doesn't do anything, right, doesn't do the standardized field sobriety test, refuses to do a breath sample, what do you really have to say that he's drunk? A smell of alcohol, maybe he ran a stop sign or changed lanes without using their signal light. Those are all indications of intoxication, but you don't really have proof that they're intoxicated. So in those situations, if you have somebody that doesn't do those things, like, it was one time I had this career DWI guy. He had been arrested I don't know how many times, and he had a friend who was a lawyer, and he kept getting him off, including the time I think that I arrested him. And when I arrested him, I walked up, he opened the door, he fell down, says, just take me to jail. He smelled like drunk, he smelled like alcohol, couldn't even walk. Refused breathalyzer, refused standardized field sobriety test. So what do you have on him? He was just sitting at a red light longer than he should have been at that moment because he fell asleep at the wheel of his car. Those things happen. So, you can only do what you can only control. So once he went off and, he went to court, I couldn't be like, oh, I'm going to catch him. That's not part of my job. It's not what I was doing. That's not what should be doing. And that's not what should be brought up for a judge either. So if it goes on and it gets appealed and things change, you got to let it go. Do y'all think there was more than one guy involved? In this case, no, not at all. This was all 100% Bryan Kohberger alone. I know a lot of people say, oh man, what about like this ninja stuff? Because he went in there and and took out, 4 people in like 10 minutes or 11 minutes. There was a guy, I think it was in Australia. He killed, I think, like 18 people in 16 minutes through 3 floors while they were awake. People were, not intoxicated and asleep. And I think like 15 minutes of that time, it was spent him being chased by police and running from law enforcement as well. So pretty crazy stuff that's out there. Steelers fan gives 5 Drunk Turkey Show memberships. Thank you, Steelers fan. Appreciate you. Welcome everybody who's now a member. All righty, I'm caught up. Let's talk about the newest stuff that just recently came out. Let's see. And that is all these documents that Bryan Kohberger's defense team has dropped. And a lot of it is in reference to dropping the death penalty, right? He wants to, save his rear end, which, if the evidence is strong, you can plea out, bro. Anyways, give me one sec. All right, so let's read this. This is from the Fox News. Says Bryan Kohberger's defense team opposes the death penalty. Cruel and unusual. If convicted and sentenced to death, Idaho's student murder suspect could be subject to lethal injection or firing squad. Bryan Kohberger's defense team is opposing the death penalty for the quadruple Idaho murder suspect on multiple grounds. Kohberger, 29, is charged with 4 counts of murder and burglary after he allegedly killed Xana Kernodle, 20, Ethan Chapin, 20, Kaylee Goncalves, 21, and Madison Mogen, 21, on November 13, 2022. Among Kohberger's defense attorney's arguments against the death penalty are there are claims that Idaho has no viable method for killing. In a capital punishment case, the state's method for obtaining a death penalty punishment is unconstitutional. A capital murder case cannot be prepared in 10 months, and the death penalty violates the prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. So here's them again wanting to delay this trial even more. Even more. They want to delay this even more. They're saying that, hey, if we're going to do a death penalty case, we can't do that in 10 months. It has to be longer than that. Even though they've already had, they're not counting the almost 2 years that has happened up to this point. Even more. So if you guys don't think that they're stalling, you guys don't think that they're trying to delay this as long as possible, you're blind as a bat. I mean, it's obvious at this point. Executing Kohberger by means of lethal injection or gunshot, as conceived by the Idaho Department of Corrections, IDOC, would violate his right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment of his right to due process under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, his attorneys wrote. So just the fact that there's a death penalty case, they're coming in with it's unconstitutional, cruel and unusual. I mean, Idaho's put other people down, my man. This isn't something that doesn't have precedent, but I understand it. When you don't have a case, you throw out what you can, even if it is just to save his life. Just kind of like what Michelle's saying, is grasping. So they also argue that that death by firing squad, which is the second legal execution method in Idaho after lethal injection, is not and was never constitutional. In other documents filed Thursday, Kohberger's defense team states that punishment which does not comport with evolving standards of modern civilized society is cruel and unusual. The vast majority of modern civilized society has already abolished capital punishment because the execution of human beings by governments is recognized to be a violation of the dignity of the spirit of human beings, his attorney wrote. So obviously they think that nobody should be put to death. The death penalty should not exist. And that is their case, basically. I mean, that's all we're going to see up and down on this. So let's see. I found something interesting, though. So this is in one of these court hearings. So this is one of the court documents. I apologize. This is case number CR 2922-2805. I want to see which, so that way you guys can find it. This is the motion order requiring state provided notice, non-statutory, such and such. So let's read this. And there's something I found in here that's real interesting to me. So it's here. It comes now, Bryan Kohberger by and through his attorney record and hereby moves the court for an order requiring that the prosecution provide the defense with notice of any non-statutory aggravating fact circumstances, and it intends to prove at sentencing phase if any sentencing phase is conducted, and that prosecution be required to prove any such non-statutory aggravating fact circumstance beyond a reasonable doubt to the unanimous satisfaction of the jury before any juror may consider an alleged aggravating fact circumstance as a reasonable support of a death sentence or support a death sentence. So this goes under 1, notice of non-statutory aggravating facts or circumstance. It says in State v. Hall, the Idaho Supreme Court held for the first time the evidence of non-statutory aggravating circumstance is admissible in the capital sentencing process, that it may be considered by a jury in determining whether to sentence an individual to death or life imprisonment. Mr. Kohberger has argued elsewhere that Idaho's capital sentencing scheme, as articulated in Hall, is unconstitutional due to its arbitrary nature. Mr. Kohberger maintains those arguments here. However, if the court disagrees and holds that non-statutory aggravating circumstance evidence will be admissible at any point sentencing phase in Mr. Kohberger's case, then the court must enter an order requiring the prosecution to provide him with significant notice of any non-statutory aggravating fact or circumstance it intends to introduce and or relay upon during the sentencing phase, should one be held. Now, the part that I found interesting is Mr. Kohberger argued elsewhere that Idaho's capital sentencing scheme, as articulated in Hall, is unconstitutional to its arbitrary nature. Where did he argue this, and why was he arguing this? That's what I want to know. You know what I mean? Because that's like, where did this come from? I want to know what you guys think. What do you guys think that he was arguing, and where was he arguing this from? Because let's continue. Maybe it'll tell us a little bit more. So such notice is required to due process, cruel, unusual punishment clause. I mean, this is again in the sentencing phase, right? And he's referring to that the death penalty is unconstitutional. Now, is that why he chose this area? You know, I think some people were asking, why would he choose an area that has the death penalty? Why not take, somebody in Washington? Maybe he thought that if he ever did get caught, that he could argue his way out of not being killed. And maybe he thought that he could do that there in Idaho, some loophole that he found, or whatever the case may have been. I don't know. So it's just kind of weird. Michelle says maybe in a school project. I don't know, because like to argue something, isn't that like in a case, you have to argue, like, isn't that like in court? I'm not sure, something you did in a school project would be considered him arguing elsewhere about Idaho's capital sentencing. You get what I'm saying? So, I mean, I thought about it. Maybe it was a school project or something, but the fact that they're saying that he has argued elsewhere that the Idaho's capital sentencing scheme as articulated in Hall is unconstitutional due to its arbitrary nature. And he maintains those arguments here. I don't know. Has BK ever been published? That's interesting. He also makes arguments in academic papers. I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's the argument that he has made elsewhere. Again, like maybe this is why he chose this place. He felt like he could argue this. And this is also telling me that a lot of their defense and Taylor's defense is coming from Kohberger. I think that's what's going on here. I mean, like the IGG thing has been around forever, or not forever. Let me rephrase it. This isn't the first time it's been used. Death penalty stuff. This isn't the first time that's happened in Idaho, and I'm sure this isn't the first time that Ann Taylor's gone down these roads. With like IGG and some of these other things. Why argue all those things like now? If you've gone through those courts before, did you argue those things in other hearings or other trials? My thought has always been like, I think a lot of this case has come down to Bryan Kohberger maybe putting in his 2 cents. Maybe because I think that some folks were looking at, or they're trying to answer the question of like, how did like Andrew Garrett or Cy Ray get involved in this case? And I think some people were thinking they saw the evidence, which is stupid. They didn't see the evidence, not like that. And then some people thought, oh, they must have saw the evidence. And then they contacted Bryan Kohberger and his attorney and stuff. And they said, hey, they did it wrong, or whatever the case may be. No, some other folks think that maybe they saw all the evidence, which is also stupid because you can only see like when you get an expert, they don't see everything. They only see the part that pertains to what their expertise is. Right. So like if you have a phone expert, he's not going to go and see the autopsies and the autopsy reports. That's not privileged to the person. You know what I'm saying? So perhaps the reason it was found out that, there was a question about the cast points, it's probably from Bryan Kohberger himself as well. I think he's the one that said, hey, this is wrong. And I think it could have very well been like, because that's his studies, right? I think in his essay, he wanted to assist rural law enforcement officers with better handling of, cloud services or whatever the hell it was, technical stuff there. So cloud-based technology or whatever. Is that, is this all kind of coming together? Why he may have chosen Idaho to begin with, the terrain, the area, how it treats and acts, and how your phone acts. I wonder if there's anything on those towers of his computer towers that show him seeing how his phone, shows up, when he's out there in the middle of nowhere and how it acts. So that way he can, he's not stupid. I don't think he's as smart as he thinks he is, but he's not stupid. So I'm just kind of curious about, some of these things here. But yeah, looks like he argued this fact here somewhere else. Debbie says he thinks he thinks he is a smarter than anyone else. This is a game to him. He thinks he is going to get away with murder. I don't disagree with you. Maybe he argued that point in his job interview with Pullman PD. I don't understand why anybody would argue this point in Pullman PD. Like when you're going through your police department interviews, like, hey, while we're at it, I want to talk about the death penalty. I don't think that comes up, This would have had to have been perhaps, like a legal argument or maybe a paper argument that's mentioned before. But I don't really see a criminal justice student, writing that type of argument. Wouldn't that be from like a law student going to, law school that maybe perhaps would have written some sort of, paper? Because we already know what his thesis was for his master's degree was the Reddit thing that he was doing when he was talking to, prior offenders to see about how they felt and how they completed and did their crimes. So, I'm not sure if where he was in his position at the college, if writing papers for case law is the place for that. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's not. I don't know. I've never taken those courses either. But I just, thinking out loud about it, I assume that would probably be more fitting for somebody like a lawyer or going to be a lawyer, maybe perhaps. But it could be. It could be. I really don't think it had anything to do with his job at Pullman PD, a potential job there. Let's see. BK's mommy argued that for Ted Bundy. Oh, yeah, that's right. Which is crazy about the whole LePage and I think there was a few people. In fact, I was watching Forensic Frenzy. I think she had a video called Parks and Recreation, and she was talking about how there was other persons nearby, like the Snake River. A body was found dismembered. There was a lot of serial killers that were tied, Snake River killer or something like that, I don't know, that were tied to that area where Bryan Kohberger was, and allegedly his alibi was too. So he did study criminals. He went to DeSales where they studied serial killers. I wonder how much of that information he knew about this area here in Idaho. Interesting stuff. I don't think he thinks it's a game. That's why I think he hasn't said a word, but I agree that he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. I think that he thought he could get away with it. I don't think he thought he would get to this point. You know, given how can I put this? What we're going to find out later is how much effort he put into not being detectable or noticed that evening and early morning. And that is going to be evidence on its own. So I don't think he ever thought he was going to get to this point. But I don't know. I don't know if he thinks it's a game either. Let's see. Maybe it was one of his interview questions that his possibly hiring would have been based in terms of profiling his personality or thought process. Maybe. I mean, I think that, you're asked, and the questions that you're asked for are going, you're questioned about. And this even goes into your psyche eval, because in order to be a police officer, you have to go through a few things: a lie detector test, a psyche eval with a psychiatrist, and the whole 9 yards. But one of the questions and stuff that they do ask you is if you're going to be able to pull the trigger if need be. And, maybe he had an argument there about it. I don't know. But I don't think that would be considered an argument, what they're talking about here in this court document. I would believe that there would be some sort of documentation of this argument, not just, questions or so. I think there would be like either court order or court hearing that happened elsewhere. Like if we go back to the Karen Reed case, I think they talked a lot about another hearing and court trial that was going on that the jury wasn't supposed to hear about. And I think that had to do with a federal investigation into the officers that were involved in that case. And so is it possible that Bryan Kohberger is being investigated for other crimes? Well, we've heard those things. Maybe he's made this argument in one of those other crimes as well. I don't know. I don't know if this would be the argument either, though, but who knows? Does anybody remember the beginning of his mother wrote a paper saying that Ted Bundy should not the death penalty? Yep, that's true. That is true. Let's see. Yep, cold cases have been using the IGG for quite a while, 100%. And so, those that just kind of go back to the beginning. It's not something that's new. It might be new to Idaho, but it's not new. And when it's broken down as to why the FBI didn't want to hand over anything, they're like, it's not going to be used in court. It's never used in court. It's destroyed. I think the IGG stuff was destroyed because it's not used. It's not admissible in court. And so it's crazy that people think that, there's got to be something shady to it when his DNA from his cheek matched the knife sheath DNA. Like, who cares about the IGG and who it pointed to and what cousin it touched or whatever the case may, or not touch, but what cousin or nephew or niece or whatever it was that connected to him? Who cares? That's not even relevant. What's relevant is it his DNA or not? And it is. You know what I'm saying? Let's see. How's it going? How's it going, Sandy? Hope you're having a good time. Sounds like he, meaning the attorney speaking for him, argued it. Well, it says Mr. Kohberger has argued. Mr. Kohberger has argued elsewhere that Idaho's capital sentencing scheme articulated in Hall is unconstitutional due to its arbitrary nature. Mr. Kohberger maintains those arguments here. I don't think there's an attorney arguing for him in this. It specifically says Kohberger. and elsewhere. So it wouldn't be his attorneys arguing for him because they're assigned for this case. Like if he was being investigated for something else somewhere else, like let's just say in Pennsylvania, you'd have to have another attorney, which he did earlier on in PA so that he can get extradited back. So, Daniel, have you seen or have any knowledge of the autopsy reports? I have knowledge of them. I have not seen them, but I have knowledge of them. Oh, I'm glad you can join the show. Better late than never, right? Let's see. I'll answer a couple questions if anybody got a couple of stars on there. Let's see. I would like to go to his trial. I live in Washington State. I would like it if it's in Moscow, not Boise. Yeah, I hear you. You know, to me, I think that there's two reasons. You know, I mentioned one earlier being the family and their ability to make it there. And like I said, I think that's a tactic on the defense's side because they don't want the jury to see the victim's family members. They don't want to have to, you know, they don't want the jury to see mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, whoever may be there crying, upset visually because of what occurred to their family member and their loved one. You know, Bryan Kohberger's defense team understands how impactful that probably will be to a jury. And they don't want that. They don't want them there. And so they're going to try to move it as far as possible. Let's see. Jeff comes in saying Jodi Arias was actively involved in her defense, and her communications with Nurmai may have included strong opinions or suggestions about how her case should be handled. True. I don't know. I'm not familiar with it, but I'll take your word for it. Let's see. Yeah. I'll if you have questions, I'll answer them. Let's see. Do you know anything about the search in the Montana at Lolo National Park? I know that they searched it. I don't know what they found, if they found anything at all. I know there's been some speculation that they found a knife. I don't know that answer. Just being honest, I have no idea if they found it or not. I do know that there was a search out there. I also know that there was a letter from Bryan from Montana that was sent to his dad, and I think there's something to do with like a hotel. They found a hotel that he was associated with, but I don't know. I mean, if they're searching for the knife, then he must have gone to Montana after the murders, right? Like they wouldn't be searching for the knife or things there if he went to Montana before the murders. So that's interesting, right? Because, well, I mean, yeah, he left the state, left the area prior to, then went back to pick up his dad at the airport and was there for a couple of days before they split. Sounds to me like, you know, once they started looking for that white Hyundai Elantra, he was there November 25th when they went and pulled up at his apartment complex. So I don't know when he went. You know, maybe he went before he went and changed his license plates. And once he changed his license plates, he went back. I don't know. But I had heard that there was a search in the mountains. Yeah. I heard they were searching for the knife. I don't know if they found anything. I don't know. Interesting that you know that. JB Tape says, all defense papers start by saying, comes now Bryan C. Kohberger by and through his attorney, and C. Taylor, public defender, which means Bakey is speaking through his attorney. Right. I mean, yeah, but this notification here, this here specifically says that Bryan Kohberger argued elsewhere. So this isn't an argument through them. This is an argument somewhere else. When it comes to this specific aspect of this argument. Let's see. Daniel, everything that BK has been accused of have never been proved. What is the motive? Well, let's look at it from a logical, explanation. And proved is perspective, because you don't know that it's been proved. Doesn't mean that it isn't proved. But when we come at let's look at what we know. We know that there was audio taken away from 50 feet away. And in that audio, you don't hear the signs of somebody raging out, right? You don't hear the signs of somebody losing control because they're on roids or they're love struck or any of those things. There's no break into the house, right? Somebody goes in there and methodically kills 4 different people on 2 different floors. Cool. There's no connection. You hear the sounds there. It doesn't sound like somebody who's heartbroken about anything. In fact, I think one of the victims hears him saying, I'm here to help you. Probably a sign of torture, right? So it kind of sounds to me like whoever committed this crime was doing it for a thrill, was maybe a serial killer in the making, maybe perhaps just wanted to know what it felt like because they had struggles with feelings or remorse. In fact, Bryan Kohberger wrote in his Tappa Talk that he struggled with those things. Now I know, pro-burgers will come in and say, hey, I knew this guy who didn't have feelings. He didn't kill anybody, blah, 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 blah. And I get it. But I want to remind you that there's this is the saying that I use because, Border Patrol's nearby. Everybody in the Border Patrol speaks Spanish, but not everybody that speaks Spanish is a Border Patrol agent. You know what I mean? So maybe perhaps not everybody that lacks remorse or feelings becomes a serial killer, but those that are serial killers typically do lack those things. And it's just another coincidence that Bryan Kohberger also lacked those feelings or remorse at some point in his life, if not to this day. And I call it coincidence because a pro-burger in the live chat says it's all a coincidence with a QUINCI whatever coincidence instead of coincidence, and he was being set up, and I knew right then and there what I was dealing with. But yeah, it doesn't take much, just a little bit of logic and common sense, and open mind, or not open mind, but looking at the evidence with realizing, all right, what is the most logical explanation for the fact that there is no, sign of a break-in? Nobody broke in the door. Nobody kicked in anything. Somebody methodically went in there, didn't make any noise, didn't scream, didn't yell, methodically killed 4 people silently. And you also have to know about the means in that, right? There's who's capable of doing something like that? Somebody love struck, somebody drunk and on roids, somebody, a bunch of people. Does that really sound like evidence of a bunch of people going in there and torturing people? I know that's like a big conspiracy amongst the no burgers. I'm not even going to call them pro burgers anymore. I'm just call them no burgers because they're nobodies. But the biggest theory amongst the no burgers is that a bunch of kids went in there. Is that what it sounds like? From 50 feet away, where you can hear whimpers and voices. That sounds like bunch of kids going in there and doing this, torturing, all these other dumb things and theories that come about this. Really? Tell yourself that. And if that's the case, then I don't know what to tell you, man. I hope you don't vote. All right, let's continue this. I think he wrote this in documents. It's possible. It's possible. The state doesn't have to prove motive. People may have noticed that make no sense to anyone else. And that's the other thing too. Let's just say you're a logical thinking person. You're trying to put logic into a crime that's not logical. Somebody who is of the right state of mind doesn't go out there and commit 4 murders, right? So, if you're in the right state of mind, stop trying to put yourself in that position. Because clearly, unless you're a serial killer, you wouldn't have done what this person did. And maybe that's why it doesn't make sense to you, because you're not a serial killer. That doesn't mean that this person isn't, or this person isn't a mass murderer, right? Let's see. For me, I'm generally against DP, except perhaps for war crimes. When it comes to the DP case, I don't know. I'm for whatever the victims' families are okay with. If they don't want it, they want to spare his life, I'm not going to say, hey, no, this guy deserves this, whatever the case. Families want it. Yeah. I'm not going to say, all right, no, I'm more of, I guess, maybe eye for an eye. This whole cruel and unusual stuff. Oh, you can't be cruel and unusual to him, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. It's constitutional law and whatever the case may be. But man, this guy didn't, the actions that he took upon those 4 innocent people were far from just cruel and unusual. Let's see. Yeah, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Let's see. Sandy Lowe says, I've said this before. I was entirely worried about the death penalty. She shows her so sure he is innocent, as she said in open court. Exactly. If I was them, right, you have 2 options, right? You have the change of venue. You have multiple options. You have the change of venue. And you have this survey, right? And the survey came back that, let's just take for granted, give them the benefit of the doubt that Latah County was the most biased. Let's take the margin of error out. When it came to Boise and some other counties in the area, Boise was up there too, higher than many other counties. And so you have to tell yourself, all right, why aren't they choosing the counties that have the least amount of knowledge about the case or the least biasness? Why are they still going for a county that is up there in biasness? And the only thing that I can think of is, there has to be an advantage there. And a lot of people are saying that the advantage there is because it's more of a liberal city, that there's a likelier of somebody that's getting on the jury there that's going to be opposed for the death penalty. You might find more people in a rural county more for it. Now, I'm sure there's some statistics to back that up or not. I don't know. But, to be honest with you, it does kind of make sense. And so then I'm thinking to myself, all right, well, you have this place that has less biasness and less knowledge of the case. You're more likely to get a fair trial. And if you are truly innocent, more likely to be found innocent in that location than the other place. However, if found guilty in this place where you're more likely to be found innocent, if you are, you're more likely to get the death penalty. Now, you can go to the other place where they're more biased and you're more likely to be found guilty there than the initial one. However, if found guilty, you have more of a chance of surviving. And by trying to choose that option over the first tells me they're more concerned with the death penalty stuff. Because again, remember I told you, doesn't matter where, but in Idaho, it's 27 plus years before somebody is actually put to death. So it's a long time anyways. And yet you're still choosing to go to the bigger place that potentially could get you not to have to get the death penalty. To me, that screams that their strategy is preparing for his guilt. He argues specifically about Idaho capital sentencing, not PA or anywhere else. That is true. So wherever it was, it would have had to have been. Why would he be arguing elsewhere about Idaho's capital sentencing? Because it's not in this case. So why would he be arguing elsewhere about Idaho's? Maybe he was arguing that in his paper from Washington. That'd be interesting. Interesting. Good point there, DB. Good point. What did he be thinking? Should the documents be released soon regarding the change of venue? I don't know. I don't know where they're going to be released. I just know what the decision was. They may not come in until the decision at the Supreme Court comes in saying exactly where it's going to be at. That might be when we finally get word of it. But I'm sure the no-burgers are going to say, I'm lying and it's not true. And they're probably going to go run and say, oh my God, it's staying in Latah County. They did it again. Let's see. My honest opinion, he's going to take a plea deal. Well, I mean, if you're trying to save your life and you're going to this extent, I wouldn't be surprised. The Elantra they suspected had tinted windows, though. Kohberger's Elantra had no window tint. Well, that's not true. It's not true at all. I mean, do you really think you're going to be able to see into windows at 4 a.m, at night? on a black and white surveillance screen. If you're looking at the Linda Lane footage, come on now. Don't matter if you have tint or not, you're not gonna be able to see jack in there unless there's a light on inside. And so, two, because I know some people were saying, hey, what about the sunroof thing? You know, they have cameras of this vehicle, right? And let's just say there was tint or whatever. You had multiple experts looking at this. What do you think they're going to do? What do you think is the thought process there? Law enforcement, the FBI that's doing this is like, Bryan Kohberger's doesn't have tint, but this one does. Hopefully nobody notices. That's not how it goes. If there was tint on there, it would have been brought to their attention, and it would have been argued. And honestly, cops aren't just looking to blame anybody. If they were looking to blame anybody for this case, it would have been Kopaka. You know, he threatened people. Cops ended up having to take his life. He couldn't argue it back. There wouldn't be a hearing. There wouldn't be no investigation into it. It would be an open case still, so nobody could pull up anything from the case. So if they wanted to just blame somebody and let it go away, well, there's your guy, right? And so they're not just looking at BK for anybody. And honestly, people really think that police department is like, oh man, we got to blame somebody for this. You know, we have all these people we've arrested, including some for murder, in this database that we have of all these criminals. We're going to go out and find the PhD student across state lines that nobody knows about except for the people that he's harassing at his school and the people that he is, you know, the reasons why he was getting fired at WSU. Yeah, let's go get that guy. That guy makes more sense than all of these people that we have in this database that we could pin this on. That makes more sense. Like, that's got to be the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. I'm not talking about what you're saying with the tint. I'm talking about the cops blaming Kohberger. But yeah, no, you can't tell if that car has tint or not on a black and white screen at night. They're all going to look like they have tint. In fact, the front windshield looks like it has tint. I assure you it doesn't. Let's see. Adam, the roommate of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, Jack D., drove a white Elantra and allegedly drove it that night. So, if you think that Jack DeCour committed this crime, he's going to drive around the neighborhood in his white Elantra when he lives down the street. And he's going to go in there silently, and he's going to kill everybody and do this perfectly in the heat of passion. No sounds, no breaking, no yelling, no, I hate you. How could you do this to me? None of those things. Just silently do it. While she's calling and leaving sweet nothing voicemails and like, I miss yous and stuff. Right? Remember, I do know some people that, you know, some folks were trying to tell me that, oh man, they were abruptly ended. No, there was voicemails, there was text messages. You really think that's what happened? I struggle with that. I mean, I understood in the beginning, right? Usually it is somebody who's scorned, but then you find out about certain things. You find out about the audio 50 feet away. You find out that the knife sheath left underneath the body of a victim, and there's DNA that doesn't match to this guy. There's no DNA of his on the knife sheath at all. But yet there's a DNA of somebody else's by itself. And then you have the car where if he lived down the block, why is he going to be driving around in circles? Making it more obvious that it was him. Like, it doesn't make any sense once you start to try to, you know, add those things to the rest of the information that we have. Right? Also, police cleared him. You know, whether you want to believe it or not, they went through the process of finding out where, you know, if it was possible that it was him. And they put this kid through the ringer. I know. I've talked to someone very close to him who has told me some of the things that had happened. They put him to the ringer. He went through it all. They took his pictures of his body. Steve did. He's talked about it. You know, he didn't do it. He had nothing to do with this. These kids' lives were taken by this Bryan Kohberger dude. And I'll say it like I know it because I do. This guy did it. And I know a lot of people say, oh, he was going to sue you. He's going to sue you. Yeah, well, we'll see you in court, buddy. See you in court. Just like, how much did OJ make when he got acquitted? Oh, that's right. He got his ass sued. And he lost a lot of money. Lost so much money that he had to go try to steal his own crap, his own memorabilia so he can sell it. And at that point, they ended up, arresting him for theft of his own stuff and put him behind bars for 10, 12 years, something like that, 8 years. Oh, yeah. I'm so scared. Where did you hear there was a search at of Low Park? I can't tell you that. Where did the dog training come in from AT? I have no idea. I wasn't familiar with any dog that he may have trained or any of those type of things. It clearly didn't seem like he had a dog. So it probably was somebody else's dog. And how long ago was it that he trained this dog and was in love with this dog? Was this something that was recent? Was it while he was in Washington, or was this something when he was growing up as a child? He had a dog that he trained and that he loved. I don't know. I don't know the answers to those questions. Not everyone is the same. Yeah. A few white Elantra-looking cars were parked near 1122 Road, and a white Elantra was stolen, wrecked, and abandoned that night. Talking about the one in Oregon. But here's the thing. Of those white Elantras that were out there, how many of them didn't have a front license plate? And out of the ones that don't have a front license plate, how many of them had or were being operated by a guy that matches Bryan Kohberger's height and weight that night? And how many of them actually have Bryan Kohberger's DNA on their person while they're driving around that night? Now, I get there's a lot of Elantras or there's a lot of cars that could have been in, but there's more to the story. This is why when I say, when it comes to the no-burgers, they don't put in everything into the case. And then they question why it doesn't add up. And I'm telling them well, you have to add everything up. You have to put in all the components of the case. It's like a math problem. Like if I'm telling you 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 5 is 30, and you're telling me no, because 10 plus 5 is 15, you're not adding the rest of the components. I mean, that's how frustrating it is. There's more to it than just the white Elantra. There's the DNA. There's also the front license plate. Somebody matching his description that couldn't exclude him. His phone also not being on during this time or not connected to the network. There's more than just one piece. But when you look at that one piece, sure. Yeah, there was a lot of white cars out there. His DNA could have gone there a number of ways, or his phone could have been off a number of ways too. But when you put them all together, does that story sound reasonable? Does it really, really sound reasonable to you? Because you got to remember, when it comes down to Bryan Kohberger's innocence or guilt, they have to find him guilty beyond reasonable doubt. That's not all doubt. It's reasonable doubt. And what reasonable story do you have that accounts for everything? Mine is just one little piece at a time. Because if not, then you're just sitting there while everybody knows that the answer is 30 and you're running around telling it's 15, looking kind of foolish. So when do evil people need a motive? That's true. Man, that's a great statement. I'm going to leave that up there for a second. Brenda Miller goes, I'm sick of this spineless judge. I'm there with you. I'm there with you. I don't believe that AT would be fighting this hard if she believed in his innocence. I think you mean if she believed that he wasn't innocent or something like that. She has to do what's best for her client. And if her client's saying, I want you to file this, and as you can clearly see, he's arguing stuff and throwing it out there, he's probably telling him a bunch of other stuff. If they don't do it and he's found guilty, he can argue that he had an incompetent defense team and yada yada yada. So they got to play his game too. Giles J says, why are people so hard on the Goncalves family for speaking out regarding the case? No one complains about Karen Reed doing interviews or the grandfather of poor little JJ in the Vallow Daybell case. It's because there are some no-burgers who have fallen in love with Bryan Kohberger. And, love is blind. You know what I mean? And when I say love is blind, it's not that you're going to fall in love with what, looks and appearance. No, it's that when you love somebody, you're so damn blinded, you won't be able to see what's in front of you, the actions that they're doing, the things that they've done wrong, right? They love this guy. They're in love with him. There's a whole freaking fan club of desperate people who love him, men and women. I don't get it personally, but idiocracy is, in my opinion, it's probably a scary reality. It is. I don't know, Daniel, but Bryan damn sure didn't do it. What makes you think he didn't do it? Like, were you with him that night? Like, what makes you think he didn't do it? How are you so sure? Like, I understand people who say, hey, I'm all for innocence until proven guilty. Well, that means you're neutral, right? That doesn't mean you think he's innocent. That's being biased the other way, right? A lot of folks, I'm not biased. I'm just innocent until proven guilty. And I'm like, but you don't think that he's possibly guilty. Innocent until proven guilty says, all right, I'm going to wait until the evidence. And I think he could be innocent and he could be guilty. But if you don't leave the option or the opportunity for it to have been him outside of saying, oh, yeah, it could be him. And then arguing every single time that some stupid argument about something that makes you think that it wasn't him. But what makes you think it wasn't him, Sarah? I would like to know what strong piece of evidence that you have that makes you believe it was somebody else. Or let me put it this way, that he wasn't involved, because even if there was somebody else, there is still the possibility that he could have been involved. So what makes you think he's so innocent? Is it his blue eyes or the way he looks at you through the camera, the way he makes you feel when I don't say talks, but stares? I don't know. Let me know. Yeah. I'm there. Tonight I'm on. Not gonna lie, I'm a little bit feisty tonight. Why didn't Moscow PD gather DNA evidence from Adams and Longshores apartment share with Jack D to determine if any blood traces were there? How do you know that they didn't? Like, don't fall into the trap where if you didn't see it, it doesn't exist, because no offense, you're not part of the case. You're not somebody privileged to the information of what they didn't do or what they did do. In fact, Bryan Kohberger's defense team says that the prosecutor or that law enforcement surreptitiously or secretly took somebody's DNA. We don't know who that person was. It was a cigarette butt, I believe. We don't know who that person was or how they searched him. In fact, it was the defense that talked about it. So don't fall under the trap that you think that the person that you're following, because like, I don't know if you're watching a No Burger channel and you're following this channel, don't think that person's part of the case either. Like, I'm not part of the case. Don't think that those people are part of the case. And just because they don't know it doesn't mean that it's not there. They're not sitting in Moscow PD briefing room going through the evidence. They don't know Jack either. And so, and I don't mean Jack as in Jack the Core. I'm talking about Jack, something else. So yeah, just because you don't know it doesn't mean it's not there. It's most likely they were checked. They were searched. In fact, I know that they actually gave up their DNA and all that other stuff too. So a lot of people did. All right. Before I get too crazy, I'm just going to go through a few more of these. That way I don't get myself in trouble. Let's see. Anybody put some stars? If you don't got any stars, I'm not going to look at it no more. So put some stars on it. Then we'll go forward from there. Let's see. Let's see. DNA. Yeah. Last spring, Ann Taylor argued that the state legislator about DP could have been Bryan argued. I don't know, because it's like elsewhere. That elsewhere tells me it's something to do with a different case altogether, or a different situation, not having to do with this case. That's the part that throws me out. Kohberger has argued elsewhere. It sounds like it has nothing to do with her. This isn't her argument. This is his argument. You get what I'm saying? So this is kind of how I'm reading it. Let's see. I'm going to bring this up because please go back and watch our other shows. Moscow PD found 2 other unknown DNA samples at the scene, but didn't look for matches. Why? They found the matches. They found out who they were, and they've cleared them. It was in the hearing. Like I made a big old stink about it. I was like, Bryan Kohberger effed up. I think is how I started the podcast. I said, if Bryan Kohberger done his, if he'd done his speedy trial, then, and this is when, oh boy, Cy Ray testified, right? When Cy Ray testified at the end of that hearing, a lot of the No Burger channels don't show the end, right? When the prosecution talks and kind of demolishes the defense's claims. Well, anyways, at the end there, the prosecution brought up the fact that they did those DNA profiles at the request of the defense and have been cleared. So, well, they didn't actually say they were clear, but they had already completed those. And the mere fact that Bryan Kohberger is still in trial, nobody else is, means that they cleared him. So, like, again, going back to then, Bryan Kohberger screwed up by not doing his speedy trial at that point, because he allowed the prosecution to build a better case against him. Everything that Ann Taylor has done, everybody's talking about her being a great lawyer and stuff like that. I honestly think everything that Ann Taylor has done has been in efforts, maybe not in efforts, but let me put it this way, has built a stronger case against him because of when they brought it up. Who gives a shit what they're saying now in these hearings? It's when it happens in trial in front of 12 jurors who are going to make a difference in this case. So them saying, oh, there's no DNA matches. Yeah. And then, all right, let's go figure out who these people are. And then they find out who they are. Now they can't use that in the real trial. Now, just like when they brought up Cy Ray and we heard what Andrew Garrett had to say, both of them said that this stuff can be fixed when it comes to the cast report. Now, I think they don't really care about the cast report because it's irrelevant because they have his GPS locations. They brought up Gladiator in that same conference or that same trial or hearing. Gladiator is the stuff that they end up getting Alex Murdaugh on, right? You can tell when the phone is sideways, upwards, and down to the meter or so of where your location is. But they want to go and argue this other stuff that's not really relevant anymore. But when you don't have anything, that's what you argue, right? Well, they had those things available to them. Imagine him not waiving a speedy trial, going into trial and them saying, hey, there's more unknown DNA and this was done wrong. That would have been his best opportunity to be acquitted. But because he's decided, or he, didn't have the guts to do it then, he decided to wait. And in doing so, seeing the defense's arguments and the fact that they hadn't wanted to give the alibi up, prolonging this even more, their own tactic is working against them because it's allowed the prosecution to go figure out those 2 DNA deals and figure out who they were and clear their ass. Now it's just Bryan Kohberger. And when it counts and when it comes to the trial itself. So thank you, Ann Taylor, for that. I think the prosecution really, truly appreciates you bringing that up to their attention and how you planned. And I use that in past tense because you can't really argue that now, right? But how you planned to argue for Bryan Kohberger. Those things are no longer going to be valid come, the summer. If this hearing goes off, then obviously they're trying to stall this. With that, I think I'm going to drop the mic for reals. Let's see. BK hasn't spoken. People close to him haven't spoken. Maybe that's why there aren't positive stories in the media. Well, here's the thing. There's been questions about what happened with the Kohbergers, right? Howard Bloom basically said that the family thought he did it. And there was media outlets and stuff that had reached out to the Kohbergers, and they didn't have a comment. Don't you think if they thought he was lying, they would have said something like this? Goncalves has said, "Oh, it's fictional, it's fake. We don't know. We never talked to him." Maybe the fact that they're not saying that stuff is because they know it's true. Let's see. Any more stars? Let's see. Love is blind. It sure is. But again, like I said, I mean, there's so many folks, the no-burgers that think he didn't do it. It's crazy. They don't even answer why they think he's so innocent, outside of the stare that he gives them, I guess. Jeff H comes with a $5 super chat saying maybe he's innocent, but just happens to appear more guiltier than the actual guilty person. Talk about rotten luck, right? Yeah. I mean, could you imagine how unlucky he has to be that there's somebody else that matches his height and weight? I mean, he did argue that at one point, his defense team did argue that there was an unknown Kohberger out there that may have committed the crime that has his DNA. That the reason they were asking for so much of the IgG stuff was because they wanted to know if law enforcement actually tried to investigate any of these other Kohbergers to see if they were in Moscow the night of of November 13th, or in the early mornings of November 13th. When I read that, remember we called that the Bryan Kohberger has an evil twin. Go back and watch that one. You'll get a good laugh. And if you still think he's innocent after all that, look in the mirror and you'll get another good laugh. Also, police mentioned the affidavit that Xana was on her TikTok, but not that there was a DoorDash order. PCA does mention the DoorDash order. It talks about that being reported by the DoorDasher, and that was right around 4 a.m. So it's in there. So I do think that the DoorDasher was there. That DoorDash person reported it. Some people think that maybe Kohberger was the DoorDasher. I highly doubt it. If there was anything that put Kohberger there, that would have been they would have been in the PCA, just like Richard Allen put himself there. That would have been powerful. Like, hey, he put himself at the scene. Like, I know some folks were saying that that he talked to police before, and he told them that he was out and about. Don't you think that would have been in there? That would have been huge at the time, because the PCA is showing evidence to prove that it was him and that he was out and about that night. It's saying, hey, we have phone data, we have images from cameras that corroborate the phone data. Would have corroborated it all if he's made the statement that he was out that night. So all these no-burgers that come into the comment section saying, oh, he reported this information. Y'all stupid. No offense, but I'm not talking about all of them. I'm talking about specifically the ones that come in and saying some of the dumbest things. The dumbest things, I swear. And it makes me like, I'm not gonna lie, it gets me up, it gets me riled up. Because it's like beating your head into a wall reading some of these things. Like, how do you really believe that? Like, do you say these things out loud? Like, say them in a mirror and tell yourself that you're being serious. And if you believe it, which no-burger channel is your favorite? I don't watch any. I really don't. I watch, when it comes to the Kohberger case, I haven't really watched anything, man, to be honest with you guys. Work's been just super swamped. I actually have like a couple full-time jobs. I do a lot of work, so I don't really get a chance to watch anything or listen to anything anymore. I'll say that I'll still tune in here and there to like Forensic Frenzy, True Crime Web with Steve. He's the CSI guy that's been on the channel. I've tuned in with him. Not sure what happened in True Crime Time. I haven't seen him up in a while. I gotta send him a text message, see if he's okay. But yeah, I really don't watch much, to be honest with you. It's just been swamped at work. It's been kind of crazy. I guess News Nation and Court TV and everything else that's mainstream that talks about the case, I've kind of caught those things. But that's about it, to be honest with you. And when it comes to like no-burger channels, I haven't seen them in a long time. I want to say months. There's no point. It's just watching people talk in circles, chasing their tails, and think they're right. It's funny. Let's see. How could Jack D be home all night yet also walk Kaylee and Maddie from the club? Jack D didn't walk Kaylee and Maddie from the club. He had left earlier. A lot earlier. Do we know what type of cell phone BK owned? I think it was an Android. Held that Idaho State permits non-statutory aggravated evidence. Now that a jury is free to hear any bad evidence the state can muster, there is no real way to know whether juries will. Okay. All righty, guys. Well, I think that's going to be it for me tonight. Y'all guys have a safe night. Have a safe weekend. I appreciate everything. Let's see. Forensic Frenzy dropped a video on Lolo Mountain's live search by Christy G. mentioned in an interview with Bryan Kohberger. Yeah. She talked about that. She and I talked about that a couple of I don't know, maybe a week ago or so. Asked if I had heard about it, and I had heard something about it, but she did a really good job on it. She knows a little bit more about that information than I do, but I had heard something about it. Again, it sounds like me and her have a lot of the same, maybe not a lot, but at least one or two, maybe three of the same sources, something like that. And so I'm not sure, but yeah, hit the like button, the whole 9 yards, ring the notification bell. If I offended you tonight, I'm sorry, not really. Also, like, you got nothing nice to say, you want to come in the comment section and talk some smack or whatever. I don't have any problems with somebody being disagreeing with me or having a comment about it. But if you're going to be disrespectful or rude, you find yourself on the block list real quick. So with that being said, guys, I'm out of here. Y'all have a safe weekend. I'll be back on Wednesday night. I'm going to have on Ken Burr. He's a real life former drug smuggler turned FBI informant snitch. You don't want to miss it. We're going to have a great conversation. It's going to be Wednesday night live. We'll see you next time.